Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Deb Crowe, who I've had the pleasure of meeting and interviewing before, she is an executive and leadership coach. Just this week, launched a new book, and it sounds like a really quite interesting book. Deb, welcome to the show. How was the book launch, and what's the title of the book?
Well, Brian, it's so good to see you again, and thanks for having me back. The book launch was exciting, overwhelming, all the things, all the feels. And the book's called The Heart-Centered Leadership Playbook.
Heart-centered, and you call yourself a heart-centered leader. What is heart-centered?
So being a heart-centered leader is honoring your connection with people. There's no reciprocity. There's no adage of what's in it for me. It's just being there for another human being, holding space, and just being completely attentive with your attention, your listening. That is it. A very, very simple behavior to give to another person.
And what's in this book that's going to be helpful to us being more of a heart-centered leader?
So I've had a nice diverse group of beta readers. I went to beta readers around the globe in different sectors, at different leadership levels. And this is how it was described kind of as a summary. So it's 1/3 kind of a memoir, but in the sense of showing my leadership journey and how I've always been a heart-centered leader since I started my company at 24 and how I sustain that. And it hasn't been always easy going against the tide. It's 1/3 academic research on heart-centered leadership, and I've implemented real case studies. And then the last third is my own original work around heart-centered leadership and some curriculum that I created for Fanshawe College because I teach a leadership series there. And the first course in the series is the prerequisite, which is heart-centered leadership. So it's kind of a third, and a third. But the good news is I'm not just sharing my journey and giving you a whole bunch of tips. People have described it as an instructional manual. So I'm giving you a call of action with some steps to take once you're done reading so that you can master the art of heart, not only in your life, but in leadership.
How'd you get into this?
Well, I grew up with a bad eye, and I've always been teased and bullied. And I had an Irish Nana who has a whole chapter in my book. And she kept teaching me that I can always control myself. I will never be able to control other people's opinions or how they treat me. And a lot of times when people are unkind, it's because they're unhappy in their own life. And it's easier to spew at someone. It's kind of like it's easier to complain about someone, Brian, than give a compliment. And that's why a lot of times if I call a business or I ask for the manager, the default reaction by that person, say it's a restaurant and I ask to see the manager, the server's probably thinking she's going to make a complaint. So I try and be a heart-centered person every day and compliment somebody. And it was just really ingrained in me at a young age. I can think back to age 8 when my grandma taught me this. And then when I started my business and realized that it didn't have a distinct space within business acumen, I kept against the current because I could always control me. I could control my business. And I feel now, since we've navigated COVID and globally things have changed on many fronts, I think more people are leaning into this because being heart-centered today in any organization, it brings a whole new meaning to corporate wellness.
A lot of people think that, to be a leader, you got to be the opposite of what you've just described. You got to be, tough. You got to be hard. You've got to be, ultra masculine. You've got to, set up competitions between people, that you've got to put people on edge, that people work when they are best when they're, a little fear of losing their job, of not getting the bonus, of not getting the big project. Why do you think that heart-centered leadership is a better way?
I don't think it's a better way. I think it is the way. And the number one problem that we're facing now post-COVID is employee retention. And if you want to retain your employees, they need to know that you care. And I think languaging within business acumen as a whole needs to change. I think we need a complete shift. And I can tell you the companies that I work with around the globe are being led by heart-centered leaders. They had record profits during COVID because they lean in and care about their people. And they've inverted the fraction of profit over people to people over profit. Because you're not going to have any KPIs, any metrics, any kind of fiduciary outcome that you're looking to have as a leader if you don't deposit the energy and the heart-centeredness into your employees. Because behind the data, behind the metrics, behind the profits is the people that drive it. So when you look after your people, the profits will always be there. And the companies that do it well, whoever is at the helm, being the CEO or the executive team as a whole, and a healthy, vital culture at large within the organization, those are the ones that are rocking it. And it comes easy to them because they lean into a value system that they learned similar to me, whether it be their upbringing of their parents or grandparents. Two great ones that your listeners will know of is largest cell carrier in the States, T-Mobile. Their CEO, Mike Sievert, I write about him in my book, one of the best heart-centered leaders I've ever met, done work with. There's not an unhappy employee in that massive company. And another one is Reed Hastings from Netflix. Same thing. When you tune in and listen to your people, that is where the magic happens, and heart-centeredness becomes not just a behavior, but a way within the company to be.
So is the key listening?
It's one of the keys. So 8 weeks into COVID, I had created what I call a heart-centered leadership sketch note with a colleague of mine from India named Tanmay Vora. And it's not an exhaustive list, but it was my list based on the 20 top qualities that I see from the leaders that I've coached in different sectors. And when I say the word leader, I don't mean any specific title or stature, because I believe we all lead both in our life and in our career. I also don't believe that you need initials after your name to be kind to somebody. So when I started putting these qualities out, I started asking leaders, what are your top 3 qualities that you have today? And what is the one that you're working on? And people were quick and excited to share the one they're working on, so that we can kind of debunk the myth that there is no perfection in us. There is no perfection in the workplace. And when we have the ability to lean in and be vulnerable and fail forward, what a model to put into any business to know that it's safe to fail. And I'd rather fail than not try at all. And that's a big part of also being heart-centered. So the list is not exhaustive, but it's certainly 20 qualities that I feel make up a heart-centered leader, regardless of title, stature, or position.
Well, I'd love it if you'd share that those 20 qualities with us and maybe read from your book. But we're going to take a break first for some messages and be back in just 2 minutes with Deb Crowe talking about heart-centered leadership and her recently newly published book just last week. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're talking about leadership tonight, and our guest is Deb Crowe. She is an executive coach, a leadership coach. She's been doing this for a few decades, I guess, and she's recently published a new book called Heart-Centered Leadership. And we're talking about leadership and whether heart-centered or other things are the right traits. And just before the break, Deb, you said that there were 20 traits, 20 qualities that were key. Key characteristics to heart-centered leadership. Can you share those 20 with us by any chance?
I can share 20. I have a poster right in front of me on the wall. It's truthful, trustworthy, modeling self-care, servant leader, open-minded, owning your character flaws, lifelong learner, avid reader, approachable, strategist, help others rise and give support, mindful of your words, attentive listening, compassionate for self and others, responsible, committed, offer a safe, welcoming environment, ability to fail forward, empathetic, and strive to mentor.
And you said that you've done some academic research. Have you done academic research that you think proves that those qualities actually are more successful as leadership qualities than the ones that I mentioned on the top, which are the ones that are typically historically associated with sort of that strong authoritarian leader.
Absolutely. And there's specific chapters in my way in the book. The first one's called Kindness is the Way. And I have some great research for that chapter. Amy Cuddy has done a lot of work on this. She's done a phenomenal TED Talk. Susan Steinbrecher wrote the book on heart-centered leadership back in 2001 when she was doing a ton of corporate work, and has since done 2 updated editions. It's not new. People are changing the movement of work in general. And I'm not going to say it's one specific generation, Brian, because it's not. But the Gen X's, the Gen Y's, and the Gen Z's, they are migrating us to a new workflow within the workplace. And they don't want to work for someone who's just all business acumen and there's no place for life to show up. Because one of the things I talk about in the book is life shows up in our work and our work shows up in our life. So when we talk about mastering the art of heart, it's being able to be that same person, regardless of where you are, whether you're at home or at work. We shouldn't take on a different personality when we walk into our place of business.
I'm struggling. And I tend to agree with you, but there's so many people that don't, and successful business executives that don't. I had a conversation recently with someone who said, you take a look at Elon Musk, you take a look at Donald Trump, you take a look at, I go through the list of very tough authoritarian leaders that strive for a competitive workplace, want to have people that don't have work-life balance, frankly, work their butts off, and stay late at night, and think that if you've got turnover, that's good because it's the bad people that are leaving. How do you address people that have got that attitude that no, what you're talking about is wokish. You're talking about something that is, too goody two shoes. And really what you need is people that are going to work hard and be tougher.
I tell them the story of how I left the medical world and got into coaching. I landed up with 3 VPs and 2 CEOs on short-term disability stress claims. They all had cancer, and I held all of their hands at the end of hospice. Success comes with a price. Being mean comes with a price. And if you look at the world today, we've had to come together as global citizens to navigate one of the worst pandemics that we never thought we'd see in our lifetime. Climbing that ladder of success can be done with work-life balance. It can be done with heart-centered leadership qualities, and you can have the respect of your team, of the organization, etc. It doesn't matter the stature or title. You don't have to be nasty and authoritarian to succeed, nor jeopardize your own health. And I'm a longtime volunteer at hospice, and I've met too many people that have led that way. And let me tell you, it's quite the conversation to have at end of life when they realize what an awful person they've been. And if they could have, would have, should have changed things, they wouldn't have been lying in hospice telling me this story. So it's visceral for me. And I've lost a lot of clients because of that authoritarian style. And at the end of the day, you can be extrinsic and have everything you want. You can have the fancy car, the fancy house, the cottage, all those things. But at the end of life, I've never had a conversation with a leader who was going to be sad that they're going to miss the extrinsic. They finally have space and time to talk about the intrinsic and that they really missed out on life. Steve Jobs is a great example. He thought getting rich and being wealthy and having stature was the be all and end all, until he died of pancreatic cancer. You look at the last speech and what he wrote, and he had it all wrong. So we get one chance to be here. And I know that I'm busy for a reason. And I know a lot of leaders come to me and say, I haven't been nice. I haven't treated people nice. And I really want to fix this. I don't know how. And so I know this to be true. Authoritarian leaders are always going to be there, Brian. That's their style. That's their leadership journey that I talked about at the beginning of this interview. We all have the right to change. And I don't know about you, but at the end of the day, I know that when I'm kind and I listen to people, that is reciprocated back to me. And I think you get back in the world what you give. And I think it's that simple.
Karma?
Absolutely. You know, if you're going to be a shitty person, it's going to come back and bite you. There's no doubt. And I mean, we could sit and have a whole show on all the people that that's happened to. I just believe that we all have the ability in life to be kind. And
Let's not do a whole
would
show, but who do you give me some examples? Who do you think that's happened to?
Well, I look at Steve Jobs and I look at how he treated his wife and his child. You know, he's just one prime example. People like Elon Musk and Donald Trump, because media sells. You know, people are influencers, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. That doesn't mean that it's right. That doesn't mean, you know, that they're heart-centered or they're not heart-centered. I mean, we as human beings, with the amount of digital information coming at us at any given day, we have the attention span like less than a goldfish. It's like 6 seconds. So tell me that people are making conscious, real decisions in 6 seconds. They're not. Digital media, digital technology as a whole has changed our lives. And when you can put the phone back and put it away and have a real heart-to-heart conversation with someone, people want it. People want to go back to that. And I hear it every day. I see it every day.
You sort of suggested that some of these people that have this authoritarian mean streak, leadership attitude, what creates stress and somehow almost cause their own cancer. Is that something you really believe?
Well, I'm a yoga teacher, so it's part of yoga philosophy that we have emotional meridians that run through our body, and each emotional meridian is attached to an organ. And so, for example, somebody that's an angry person usually has difficulty with their gallbladder. I've had several executives who've had gallbladder attacks. And when you can peel the layers of the onion and get to the root or the etiology of that emotion, it's their lifelong journey. A lot of it stems back to their childhood. It's what was modeled for them. This is the way we do things. Or they had a boss that said, you have to do this. And when I bring this ray of light and say, you don't have to live in this place of obligation, you're allowed to be a self-directed human being. You're allowed to say, I want to do this, I get to do this, I choose to do this, not I have to, I should, I must. Well, that's what I learned. Just because you learned it doesn't mean that it's right. So I see these executives carrying these emotions and getting sick, and the 5 that I lost, I don't take that lightly. And I would rather spend time having quality conversation to find out where in their life they weren't validated, where in their life they didn't feel worthy and have that self-worth and worthiness. And where did it become attached to what they do and who they are on their business card? That's what this is all about.
So you really feel that based on your yoga teaching and your experience that you can almost create disease and sickness within yourself based on your management style?
I do.
So I've, this may be a little bit too personal, but let's try it here. So I've had a bunch of digestive problems recently, and I went for a whole bunch of tests, and my physician couldn't find anything wrong with me. I went and got a whole bunch of tests at the blood, clinic to see if I had allergies to different foods and things like this, and they couldn't find anything. And so my physician sent me to a health and wellness person who said, it's stress. It's just stress. And it's your body telling you you're under too much stress. What do you think of that? Does that make any sense?
I agree with your health and wellness person. If we don't have a healthy gut, that is the start of the demise of our health, because our gut is kind of like the hard drive, if you will. And an unhealthy gut leaks into our body, and it can cause all kinds of havoc. So I agree with your person. And it's one of the things that I have done since I was a young adult, is always look after my gut. I've always had my foot in both camps, Western medicine and complementary alternative, whatever you want to call it, because I think they need to be integrated. Because when the traditional Western medicine doesn't find something and they do all the different testing and you're still having the symptoms, we by nature want to know what's wrong, and stress, and there's tons of medical articles and journals written on it. It affects us all in a different way. And I think it goes to the weakest part of whatever's unbalanced in our body. And I'm not, a doctor or anything. This is my own personal experience. And I think your health and wellness person's right. That's where the stress is manifesting for you.
And it can actually manifest, not mine, but the authoritarian leader, as cancer. It can get that bad.
These people literally did not eat well. They did not sleep. They just kept going and going and going for decades. They lost one or more marriages. They had no relationship with their children and grandchildren. It was more than just indigestion, heart palpitations. It was, when we get those aches and pains and we don't listen to them, they're eventually going to get our attention. I had an executive that had blurry vision for 2 years and wouldn't go get her eyes checked. She had a retinal stroke and lost her eyesight in her right eye. So I hear things like from the authoritarians, well, Deb, that's so common sense. And I'm like, you're right, but you don't make it your common practice. So being healthy is holistic. It's looking after our physical health, our mental health, our spiritual health, whatever that is for you. We need to look after our whole person. It's not just, eating one meal and drinking a couple glasses of water and, oh, I did good today. It needs to be a continuum, which is a good series of good habits, which turns into a healthy lifestyle. Because when we're healthy and well, we're vibrant in everything that we do.
Where can I get your book? Remind us the title and where we can buy it.
So it's the Heart-Centered Leadership Playbook, How to Master the Art of Heart in Life and Leadership. And it's on Amazon, it's on Kindle, it's on Kobo, so all the places. So if you want to hold a book, you can get it on Amazon. If you're an e-reader, you can get it on Kindle and Kobo. And in the beginning of 2024, it'll be in chapters.
Deb Crowe, thanks so much. We're going to take a break for some messages. I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask her to read something from the book. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes with Deb Crowe. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Deb Crowe, and she's talking about heart-centered leadership and a book that she's recently published based on her years of work as an executive and leadership coach. A bunch of academic work she's done, a bunch of practical experience that she's had. And it sounds kind of interesting because it's something that people have been talking about a lot lately, whether it's empathetic leadership or heart-centered leadership or, leading with a more positive attitude versus sort of the typical historical sense that you had to be this authoritarian leader that was a little bit scared, a little bit removed, not a friend, etc. And, I think there's still a debate out there, but Deb thinks the debate is over and is concluded. Deb, you were saying you were going to read something from the book, maybe your dedication?
I'd love to read the dedication, Brian.
Please do.
To all the courageous souls who dare to lead with their hearts, this playbook is dedicated to you. You who possess the unwavering belief in the power of love, compassion, and empathy as catalysts for change. You who understand that true leadership transcends titles and authority, flowing from the depths of your being into every interaction, every decision, and every vision you bring to life. To the leaders who choose vulnerability over invulnerability, authenticity over masks, and connection over distance, this is for you. You have embraced the profound truth that the greatest strength lies in showing up fully, embracing your imperfections, and inspiring others to do the same. In a world often driven by profit margins and competition, you have chosen a different path, a path guided by values, purpose, and the genuine desire to create a positive impact. You have recognized that success is not solely measured by financial gain, but by the lives touched, the souls uplifted, and the love shared along the way. This playbook seeks to honor your commitment by offering guidance, insights, and practical wisdom that aligns with the beat of your compassionate heart. It is a heartfelt reminder that true leadership stems from a deep place of inner knowing, of staying attuned to the whispers of intuition, and of honoring the sacredness of each human connection you forge. May these pages serve as a compass illuminating the path to heart-centered leadership, a path that intertwines empathy with strategy, mindfulness with action, and love with accountability. May it inspire you to lead not only with your mind, but also with your heart, recognizing that the greatest transformations occur when passion is infused with compassion. To the leaders who are daring enough to dream big, to reimagine possibilities, and to embody a vision that celebrates the collective well-being of all, this playbook is a humble offering. May it provide you with the tools and inspiration to navigate the challenges, embrace the joys, and cultivate the immense potential that lies within you and with every person you lead. With deepest admiration and gratitude, Deborah Crowe.
That's beautiful. But, I've been in the business world for 40 plus years. I've worked in across Canada, across the United States. I've interacted with a lot of people. I don't think love, compassion, empathy, I think, were those the first three words that you used? Those are traits that people would typically use. Toughness, hard work, competition would be the words that, maybe people use. And I hope you're right. I'd like to believe you're right, but I interact with too many people that would disagree.
And that's kind of my mission in life. This is my legacy work that I'm going to do to the day I'm not here anymore.
So, if you met an executive that had excessive turnover, that believed that micromanagement and keeping people on the edge, that competition between people to succeed. So, not quite political infighting, but effectively political infighting, kept people honest, kept them working late at night, worried about their job, underpaying people, creating that sort of competitive attitude, reaching down within the, wherever you went in the organization, being very authoritarian, being directive, always making the final decision, not listening to people, just deciding, which is sort of the way that leaders would have acted in that authoritarian manner in the past. What would you tell them?
I had one recently, and I'll give you a visual description so you'll understand. Have you seen the movie with Meryl Streep, The Devil Wears Prada?
Yes.
So when the young Anne Hathaway walks in, she barks at her, whatever she needs, and then she flails her hand. That's all. That was him. And his staff was getting sick. He had 2 executives on his team have a heart attack. And the VP of People and Culture brought me in. Tough nut to crack. He owned the company, and he was also the president and CEO. And when I finally got through to him after multiple coaching sessions, that's the way his dad led. He was second generation to take over the family. And that was his normal. That was his right. And when I taught him things like intrinsically validating people and not interrupting people, and when someone's speaking to you and you're listening, you know it. When you're speaking to someone and they grab their cell phone, or they're not listening and their mind's somewhere else.
They're looking down underneath the table because they're playing with their cell phone.
You know it. It's rude. And they are missing out on so many great opportunities to notice something or hear something about that person in front of them. It's the number one problem among executives and C-suites, because they have this tsunami of information coming at them all day long. And they rely a lot on intuition. It's a whole chapter in my book. Intuition management is what it's referred to in leadership. But when they have to pause and feel, it's a trigger for them, because it makes them think of that boss. It's episodic to a previous employer. It's episodic of climbing that proverbial ladder of success. It brings them back to how a parent brought them up, or a grandparent said, this is what we do in our culture and you don't waver. And the F word for them is failure. and they don't allow themselves to do it. So if you live in this bubble of perfection, which is an intangible reality, how fun is that? You're never going to be perfect. None of us are perfect. And so they rule with that heavy hand or fist, as this executive described. And he was always told he would be seen as weak and meek and mild if he wasn't the way he was. And then he got sick. And he's like, I thought it was just a bunch of, gibberish. And he's like, I think you're right. So it's about trust and rapport with people. It's what it is. It's honoring your connection with a person and having an intrinsic value to it, and not an extrinsic value, a measurement or a KPI, or seeing that person. I had a CEO that was amazing. He hired a new CFO, and the guy was starting on a Monday, and he called the CEO at home and he said, my father-in-law just passed away and he's in Poland and I have to go and help bring the body back. How do you want me to handle this? Because I'm starting as your CFO tomorrow. And he just very calmly said, my sincere condolences to you and your family. We'll see you when you get back. That was it. And he couldn't believe it. And I said, that's why this company does so well. Do we have control when people get sick, are in hospice, accidents, the emergency room? We have to go to a funeral. And you look at distance before COVID, not everybody lives in the same country. And if we can't be heart-centered human beings to another human at one of the worst possible moments in their life, I don't get it if somebody can't extend that grace and that heart-centeredness to someone else, because we're all going to be there.
I think that some of the tough people that I've described, are human, and with those very traumatic time periods like you've described, are heart-centered and are empathetic, and their humanity comes through. But it's the day in and day out stuff that's different.
Exactly.
And it's the day in and day out stuff where they're more of the micromanager, authoritarian, this is my way or the highway, just get it done kind of attitude.
They keep showing up in my class at Fanshawe. My leadership series is full every semester. This is year 3. And they want to dip their toe in the pond because they're eager to learn, because business acumen has never had space for this, which is why now I'm hoping to continue to open the bandwidth in, elementary, high school, post-secondary, graduate work, et cetera, et cetera. I've helped a number of master's students around the globe who were working on their thesis about this. I've contributed to their research project or their thesis at large. I've had a couple of colleagues do their PhD, and their dissertation was about in and around, softer leadership, the adjectives you described in leadership. People want this. People are still not doing well since the global pandemic. And I think it was the right time and the right space, which is why I decided to finish the book and get it out there. And we had our soft launch a month ago. We did our official launch this week. And I have been overwhelmed by the amount of people that want to have me into their business and read this book and get some strategies. And if anything, I'm going to get some of the comments you've shared. But for me, Brian, it's an opportunity to have a conversation. And why can't we look at things differently? We do it in all other aspects of our life and within our work. And why can't we do it within leadership as well?
Deb, I'm really intrigued by your book and the contents and your thesis. Would you mind sharing maybe the table of contents or something to give us a sense of,
Sure.
what you tell us about in the book and what we would learn from it and how we would go through this process?
Absolutely. And I was really honored to have Hugh MacLeod, who was our previous Deputy Minister of Health in Ontario. He offered to write the foreword for me, which was really interesting. So a few of the chapter names, we start off with a manifesto because I want to set the foundation. Chapter 1 is called Embracing the Call to Leadership. I have even written a heart-centered leadership bill of rights. There's a chapter on midlife wisdom, embracing being a modern elder. So anybody 45 and older, that's you. Leadership in the wake of tragedy, my heart-centered leadership model. Business acumen with heart, that's the deep academic heavy chapter. The self-care journey in leadership, forgiveness in leadership, the value of intuition management, the beauty of imperfection, managing the inner leader, the integration of life and leadership. There's a beautiful chapter on my Irish Nana, and then I end it with my heart-centered leadership journey. So it's 17 chapters in whole. And then a beautiful list of resources and recommended readings and some acknowledgments of great people around the globe that really encouraged me to get this book out there.
Would you mind reading the 20 criteria, the 20?
The 20, yes, I can read that. So truthful, trustworthy, model self-care, servant leader, open-minded, own character flaws, lifelong learner, avid reader, approachable strategist, helps others rise and give support, mindful of words, attentive listening, compassionate for self and others, responsible, committed, offers a safe, welcoming environment, ability to fail forward, empathetic, and strives to mentor.
These are good qualities in life as well as in companies.
Absolutely.
No question about it. We're going to take a break and come back with some concluding comments with Deb Crowe, executive and leadership coach and author of what sounds like a really interesting book, in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Deb Crowe. She's a leadership and executive coach, and she has done that for a couple of decades. She's written recently a book about heart-centered leadership that's available online, and in the new year it'll be available at Indigo, Chapters, etc. It's been an interesting conversation, Deb, and I really appreciate you chatting with me about your thesis tonight. I did a DBA, a doctorate in business administration, and I took a look at what were the keys to success in economic development. And I took it initially from a very sort of financial, economic oriented aspect, because I thought that money, capital, leadership, et cetera, were some of the keys to success. And as I read a lot of the academic work in this area, I came to the conclusion that a term that lots of people have used, that I ended up using in this research, was social capital, which is about relationships, authentic relationships with people, ended up being critically important, which sounds like some of the things in regards to active listening, open listening, empathy, et cetera, that you talk about in your list of 20 qualities. But it was interesting, and you've probably read some of this. A lot of this work was done initially based on the prisoner's dilemma game and what would be or wouldn't be successful strategies in that prisoner's dilemma game, where you remember that two people have been accused of a crime, and if one provides the information on the other, then one will go free and the other one will go to jail. But if they both provide the information, both will go to jail. And if no one provides the information, both will be set free. And so it's a question about, do you work on the relationship, or do you try to win at all costs? And so is win-win better, or is win-lose better? And it was interesting because through all that sort of academic work and computer work and simulation exercises, et cetera, they came to the conclusion that if you only deal with people once, the win-lose strategy is a very effective strategy. In other words, the authoritarian strategy, being the tough guy strategy, is actually the best strategy. But if you have to deal with people more than once, it's a terrible strategy, because the person's going to do the tit for tat and going to come back and hit you just as hard, if not harder. And that's the only strategy that works, because if someone is mean to you and you're not mean back, then you're a wallflower or a carpet or something like that, and you get walked all over. And so they called it sort of the shadow of the future, that if there was going to be an impact in the future, that with reputation or successive deals or something like that, you had to take a strategy that was more of the cooperative strategy. And how I apply that to business is, if you're going to be buying something from someone once, you can be that, A word. But if you're going to be dealing with someone in a partnership or in successive transactions, or you're worried that that person's going to damage your relationship in the community, the business community or whatever, you can't. And I worry that some of the people that believe this authoritarian sort of A-word style of leadership works and is best is because they see people as expendable. And you can just bring them in and, cycle through them, whether that be people that you employ or people that you're doing business with or people that you're negotiating with or whatnot. And until and unless you have long-term ongoing interactions and relations with people, do you come to the conclusion that you've actually got to be the more empathetic, cooperative, heart-centered person. What do you think of that?
I think it's really interesting. And I'm going to go back to the beginning of the conversation and, that 8-year-old girl that learned from her Nana. When we can control this, what are we doing? We are demonstrating how high our level of self-awareness is. Otherwise, we know the inner leader. We know who he or she is. The adage, the cliche that came from that description of what you just said, when you cross a bridge, you never burn it, because you'll be going back over it at some point in your life. So because you may have had that one encounter where you made a conscious decision to be that type of, leader that you described, that person's going to grow and keep learning and evolve. And that person's going to land up in a different role that I can guarantee you will cross that bridge in life or in your leadership journey. And the heart-centered leader will forgive because they know that other person needs some growth. And I'm firm in that, because I'm coaching in 6 countries. And I know what I've always felt in my heart was right. And I'm now seeing it in small, medium, and large organizations. I'm working with a CEO now who's honing his COO to take over. And he got very emotional. And he said, look at everything I've built and everything I had. And I've been the most inhumane person to others to get here. And he said, I want my legacy to be turned around, and I know you can help us. And he said, because I don't want to go to my grave knowing that I created what I did and I have what I have. And I have all this wealth. And those leaders, they land up on their own. And I know that because I coach them, and they're very lonely and they have everything. And the remorse that they have, you can have everything in the world, Brian, but if you have nobody to share it with, how fun was that to build? So that's what I say about that. At the end of the day, we all have a beating heart inside our chest. And when it's aligned with our head, you can still make KPIs. And in my world and my languaging, KPI means kindness promotes improvement. And metrics can be made. When you sink in and give to your people, magic can happen. And I see it every day in huge organizations. You don't have to lead with an iron fist and, a fiduciary responsible leadership style for everything you do. You have to sit back and realize that your company's doing as well as it is because people believe in you as a leader. And a true heart-centered leader has a bunch of heart-centered leaders below them who are cut from the same cloth, feel the same. And at the end of the day, I want to be treated nice. That's how I treat people. And for those who aren't nice, I will always control this. And our paths will cross again, guaranteed. That's just when people say a coincidence or serendipitous, we're all energy, Brian. And your bridge will come and you'll have to cross it again, and maybe eating humble pie.
Deb Crowe, thanks so much for joining us. Really interesting conversation. Remind us the title of your book, please.
The Heart-Centered Leadership Playbook, How to Master the Art of Heart in Life and Leadership.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videocasts are available on my website, briancrombie.com. Thanks, Deb. Good night, everybody.